Okay, so everyone, you'll see that record is kind of in the top left corner, so you can see that. All right, so everybody, just want to provide a little opening statement, as well as this is the Planning Development Advisory Committee for the meeting today on June 16th at 4 o'clock. Just let you know, this is our first Zoom Advisory Committee meeting, and this meeting has been previously recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel for your viewing pleasure. I just want to let you know that this meeting is audio and video recorded, like I said, so it'll be retained, part of our retention schedule for the town of Cobourg that's approved through bylaw. Just a reminder that the minutes that are recorded by the secretary and approved by the committee will be the official record of the meeting and the minutes of the actual meeting. This is just to be viewing for public transparency purposes for this new virtual world that we're living in. If you have any questions regarding the storing or the location or those things with regards to like collection of information, just contact my office and I'd be happy to assist you with that. As always, people wishing to register delegations or be part of the public gallery for this, just contact my office and we can send you the link for this in the future if there's any other meetings that are coming forward. Other than that, we'll move into the election of the chair. I think Adrian has come on, so I'm going to push it to her.
Hello, Adrian.
Welcome.
Just before we go, before we get into that, Adrian, and the election of the chair, as you know, obviously, the election of the chair is due to the recent passing of Jim Doubt. The very unfortunate situation. Many of you have already passed along your condolences to the family, and I know that council has made some recognition as well. Just certainly want to formally recognize Jim for all of his enormous contributions to the town of Cobourg. He was only on the Planning and Development Advisory Committee for just over a year, I guess, but his presence in other advisory committees and areas throughout the community, as well as his professional career and background in architecture and engineering, has left a huge positive impact on the development of our community. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Doubt's accomplishments and achievements for the betterment of the town of Cobourg. And if anyone else has anything to share, I think this may be a good time to do so.
Oh, thank you for doing that, Glenn. That was well said.
Hey, Adrian, I'm passing the torch to you now. You're set up. You just have to unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go. Sorry, guys. I was having some technical difficulties. So where are we at right now?
At the election of the chair section of the agenda.
Okay, so actually, Brent, I was going to pass this to you because I don't have my spiel at home. That's the only thing, because I haven't been into the office. So if you don't mind, do you have the spiel? The
spiel? Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I can do that, no problem.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Basically, this is something that we do every year, but since that we have unfortunately lost our chair for the meeting, and we do have a vice chair, we will just open up the floor to motions for chair of the PDAC committee. So anyone that wants to put forward a motion. Go ahead, George.
I'll make a motion to nominate Rick Stinson as chair.
So member Cam Horse has recommended member Stinson, or Vice Chair Stinson, as the chair. Do you accept that, member Stinson? Rick?
I would be happy to do it, but it's not a bad idea to switch things up once in a while and give other folks an opportunity to do that if they would like. But if no one else is going to volunteer or be nominated, then yes, I would accept that.
Any other motions for chair? Seeing none, is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? All those in favor, as Rick Stinson is the chair? All those opposed? Carried. There you go, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. Do we need to elect a vice chair as well?
Yes. Would you like me to do that, Chair, or would you like to do that?
You can proceed, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and now we can receive motions for vice chair of the Planning and Development Advisory Committee. Any motions on the floor for that? For vice chair? Sorry?
I made the last one. Is it okay to make this one too?
Yes, go ahead.
I will nominate Dawn as a vice chair.
Don, do you accept the nomination for vice chair?
Sure. If the chair's okay with that.
A little more enthusiasm, Don.
So the member accept. Any other motions for vice chair? All those in favor of the motion for Don as the vice chair of the PDAC? All those opposed? Carried. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Your Stinson's all yours.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have everyone together, even in this format. It's been a while since we've been together and seen each other. The first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declaration of interest they'd like to make on any of the items on the agenda today? Seeing none, we'll proceed then. Are there any additions to the agenda that anyone would like to include for today's meeting? Nope. Seeing that, we'll move on. Next item is the adoption of the minutes from our last meeting back in February. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Beatty. Any discussion, questions about the minutes from that meeting? If not, all those in favor of adopting the minutes from the February 25th meeting? That motion is carried. Thank you. So we move to unfinished business, and the first item is the Affordable and Rental Housing CIP. Are you going to start with an with an introduction, Glenn, or how are we going to do this?
I can just quickly summarize what has transpired over the last few months. So since mid-March, the government obviously has declared a state of emergency, and the town of Cobourg Council also followed suit with its own declaration of emergency for the town of Cobourg. A lot of things have happened since then in terms of Victoria Hall and municipal buildings being closed to the public, and a lot of facilities and stores also locked down quite substantially. So there has been over the last few months some work being undertaken as part of the Affordable Rental Housing CIP. There was, of course, a pause of a few weeks, essentially, while everyone kind of got their legs under them and figured out how to work remotely and carry on business as close to as possible to what was before. So in that meantime, MHBC with Dana and Kelly have been working on finalizing all of the outstanding items with the background report, as well put together the draft CIP document that you have as a part of the agenda, as well some presentation materials that unfortunately we had to postpone our open house, which was scheduled for April. And we're looking at some options for undertaking further public engagement on this process that we can talk about later, as well as some presentation boards and panels as well. So there has been some work undertaken behind the scenes. It hasn't completely paused or taken a full break. There's been a lot of work being done. So today's meeting is essentially to review the draft background report, or the final background report actually, the draft CIP, and any other presentation materials that MHBC have provided. So I think that being said, maybe either Kelly or Dana, you can maybe bring us up to speed a little further on the reports, and we can have some discussion.
Sure. Did you unmute or? I'll
So
start.
I thank you everyone for having us today. I think what would be helpful is maybe Kelly can just, as a sort of a refresh, give us an overview of the work that we've done to date and sort of where we're sitting today. I think that will be helpful in just putting forward as well an overview of the draft CIP. I know we have the background report as well. We have continued to work forward. We have received quite a few comments on the draft CIP, which have been very helpful. And certainly in terms of next steps, as Glenn was saying, we have some challenges to ensure that we have very broad public consultation, but at the same time, we have some opportunities with some of the online public engagement tools to actually be able to reach additional folks on this. So we're looking at ways to do that, to keep the momentum going. I think the one thing I will say before I pass it to Kelly is, I think for municipalities never been more important to look at ways to leverage and ensure that increased housing supply is coming on board, especially affordable rental housing, given the situation we're in and the unknowns going forward with people's access to housing. So as much as I know your budgets are going to be under quite a lot of scrutiny going forward, this is probably an area where there's a great need to ensure that you're working in partnership with those who can bring this type of housing forward, because it's greatly increased in terms of the need, I think, in the next year or so.
Okay, thanks, Dana. So I think where we left off the last time we met was in January, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like forever ago. But at that time, we had presented to you a preliminary draft background report, which was kind of a compilation consolidation of the legislative and policy framework, as well as the preliminary consultation and stakeholder engagement elements that we have undertaken, as well as identification of kind of some key theme areas to explore further. And I know that when we spoke last in January, members of the PDAC had some further areas for us to look into with respect to the background report, particularly in terms of success and uptake of other municipalities with similar CIPs. And we went back and did a lot of that additional research and compiled that into this revised final draft background report, I'll call it, which I think was circulated to you early in March. And that one should have incorporated any and all comments we had received, I think, right up until about March 12th. So that's where we're at with that one. Again, since we met in January as well, we did hold an additional open house to obtain further feedback on the priority areas in order to kind of develop some key areas of focus to guide the CIP and the programs. And we did as well present a brief update to council late January as well, kind of on where things were with that. Following all of the background research and that information we obtained through the consultation both with the stakeholder groups and the public, we developed a CIP with a suite of programs and incentives aimed at really incentivizing two key areas of focus, being the rental housing, as well as kind of the additional creation of secondary suites. And so we had prepared an executive summary document as well as the full CIP document for your review and consideration. And I don't know if maybe you want me to go through high level this suite of programs, or if you want to open up discussion now on it, or Dana, if you have kind of anything more to add into what went into creating the programs, and then maybe we can have a discussion on that. I don't want to just take away time from hearing feedback for me regurgitating what's in the report. So
Yeah.
Trying to find a balance there.
I would only add that in determining the range of programs, we did some additional research on what funding was available under other programs that would actually enable individuals to leverage the maximized amount of funds depending on the nature of the program. We also looked at, obviously considered a lot of the feedback from the consultation session we had, and we noted that there are some programs that are really catered towards what I would say projects that will take some time to come on board, that will involve a number of approvals. So the assistance is there sort of at the end once those are completed to enable implementation with some funding to offset some of the costs, mostly related to development charges, whether that's through an offset through loans or grants as is described in the program. So there's a component in here that really focuses on assisting purpose-built rental builders. There are other elements in the program where we heard quite a lot from the community that there are ways to provide additional rental housing through individuals who may choose to look at it as not only a way to provide a attainable rental suite, but also to offset their own costs. So that's through the additional programs we're recommending related to secondary suites. That could be someone who's adding an additional suite in their existing home or an additional suite on their existing property. And that's an area where obviously there's a lot of support and direction from the province to enable that type of accessible housing. And the one other element I would say is, although most of these are focused in and around rental housing and affordable rental housing, we also looked at ways to enhance those programs with some of the other elements that needed to be considered. And that would be if there is a brownfield site, there's sort of this layering of additional advantages. If there's additional design and sustainability built into the project, we've accounted for that to enable some additional funding sources. So not only do we get the rental housing coming forward, but these forms of rental housing are meeting the other objectives and requirements of the municipality, whether it relates to accessible design or sustainability, or if it's a brownfield situation. So we tried to take all of that and mold it into this program, which we know also has programs that would be open to everyone with a fixed amount. So it would sort of be a first come, first serve with the maximum amount provided, and other programs that really would be limited to one or two developments. And so there would be an assessment by staff and a determination that would go back to council for approval. So you kind of see the way it's structured, that it's as refined as it can be, but also as flexible as it can be, if that makes sense.
I certainly don't think it's necessary to go through the whole program, but it might be helpful, Kelly, if you could do just an overview summary of what the recommendations are.
Yes, so I can do that. I think what is easiest to do is if I kind of go through what we did. Ultimately, there are 13 different incentives or different programs available for applicants to access, which there's funding directed towards purpose-built rental housing, second units and coach house development, emergency and transitional housing, as well as affordable home ownership, and then brownfield accessibility and sustainability. And so what we looked to do is provide opportunities for grants equal to up to 100% of the fees on planning applications for any sort of a development application for an affordable rental that's in the primary market, or a purpose-built rental, which again is in the primary market housing project. And so those would provide grants back to those applicants once they have developed the affordable units. And they would provide for additional funding, additional incentive to get those units created. And there is as well an agreement that needs to be put in place between the town and the developer to ensure that those units are maintained affordable or maintained as rental for up to 20 years. And they would also be eligible to access reductions in development charges, and that would be based on a sliding scale. So if you provide the highest amount of sustainability and accessibility features, and a higher proportion of affordable units, or a higher proportion of units that are larger, like 3-bedroom units, let's say, that would provide you higher to that 100% reduction in the DC, whereas if you're not providing as many of those, you wouldn't get the full 100% DC. Maybe you would only get 25 or 35, depending on what criteria you're checking off. And then the next one for the purpose-built rental housing would be as well property tax increment grant program, and that would allow for a grant equal to the incremental increase in the property tax assessment and revenue resulting from improvements to existing developments or the development of new buildings containing affordable rental or purpose-built rental units. And that would kind of forego the local property taxes for up to 5 years. So those 3 kind of incentive programs are aimed at increasing the affordable stock as well as the purpose-built rental stock. And then we have a series of incentives available kind of at more, that's like Dana said, you've kind of got your longer term wins and your quick wins. And we viewed the secondary suites as a quicker win in terms of bringing things on the market. And so in terms of the funding available for the creation of second suites, we have a series of programs. Again, there would be a grant or reduction to the application fees associated with any of the building fees for your secondary suite. And then you would also be provided either a grant or a loan to offset the costs it would take for you to ensure your second suite is up to code, and provide that kind of as a legalized new second suite unit. And then those are the 2 primary areas of focus that the majority of the incentives are aimed at creating kind of the housing stock. But we do know there were some other areas of focus which we wanted to provide availability for in the suite of programs. So there are, again, similar planning and building fee waiver programs and development charge grant programs for any emergency and transitional housing projects, as well as similar grants that you could apply for if you were in the market to develop affordable housing for ownership tenure as opposed to the rental tenure. And those 4 incentives would be tiered a bit lower in a staff assessment. If the application were to come in and those reviews were to come on, but there were also applications for the rental housing and purpose built, that would be something that staff would factor in their evaluation. But the programs are still available there for applicants to access. And again, with the affordable home ownership program, they would be required to enter into an agreement that would ensure that the affordable ownership unit could not be resold to not affordable status. It would have to be kind of maintained in perpetuity for a certain number of years. And this is really kind of geared towards those organizations that would assist to help provide ownership housing, such as Habitat for Humanity, to have an additional stream of revenue there to make the project more successful for them to work with clients to get them in an ownership situation. And then we do have three other incentives which are not focused on any sort of housing creation, whether it's affordable or purpose-built or market rate, but it would apply more broadly, and the funding would have to come through a different commitment of council, but we wanted to ensure that these incentives were available and set out in a program so that if council's desire were to more broadly apply incentives for brownfield redevelopment, for universal design and accessibility beyond just housing, as well as sustainable design beyond just housing, those funds would be available through the program. And so that is kind of a very, very quick overview, and I know it's a lot to take in. The document's quite large, but what we tried to do was strike a balance based on the feedback we received, understanding where there's the greatest need in the community, while still providing opportunity and flexibility for other needs if they may arise in the future. And so, Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but
No, I think as I said, I know we've received some comments back, all fairly positive with a few suggested changes and tweaks from the ministry referencing some other programs. And also I know that I think it's our plan as and when we go back out to the public to reach back out to the stakeholders that we met with on a more of a focused group, just to provide that information to them as well.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. That's a helpful summary. So perhaps the best way to deal with this is just proceed as if we were around a table in a normal meeting, and we'll just go from member to member and see if anyone has any comments or specific questions they'd like to ask of either Kelly or Dana. So Alistair, why don't we start with you and see if you have any comments or questions.
Yes, I've got a couple. The first is on the potential sale of rental units, how do you preserve the rental status of those? That's one. The other is on the summary that would allow people to sort of judge whether or not it's worthwhile going down that path.
Sorry, Alistair,
Sure.
you cut out on the
Yeah.
second question. Sorry.
Repeat the second question, Alistair.
I heard going down the path, but I didn't hear the first part.
Oh, we seem to have
Frozen.
lost Alistair altogether here.
Oh, he's back.
Back.
Ooh.
Hello?
Hello, Alistair. We've been having trouble. You've frozen up a couple of times. I think the second question, if you can
that's
repeat that.
interesting. I'm looking fine here. Okay.
And from here too.
Okay. The second question had to do with the sale of rental units and how you preserve the status as a rental unit if somebody decides to sell the darn thing.
So I
So
can
hear that.
speak to that. Kelly can speak to that as well in terms of the
Mhm.
agreements that can be provided on title.
Yeah, so in
Okay.
terms of providing, like any applicant, first of all, wouldn't be provided the grant until everything's built. Once it's built, they're required to enter into an agreement with the town.
Okay.
And in that agreement, they have to provide the units at a certain rate or maintain them as rental for a certain amount of time. And if they don't, if they default on that, then they have to pay the town back.
Okay.
And so the agreement will be set out and signed by both parties, and that ensures, I believe the maximum you're allowed to do it for is 20 years.
Okay.
And then the rental rate would be assessed based on whatever the affordable rate through CMHC is in that particular time period.
Okay.
Also, Alistair, with respect to, control over selling of rental units. So there are protections under the Condominium Act and the Planning Act that prevent the sale of rental units without going through a process and a conversion. They call it condominium conversion.
Okay.
And typically, and what is generally accepted policy and practice is that a municipality should not allow condo conversions where the vacancy rate is below 3%, which is an indicator of a healthy market. So in Cobourg's context, our vacancy rate has been, 1% or below for the last quite a few years, put it that way. And therefore, there have been no condo conversions approved in at least 10 years or so. So there are some protections that someone just can't sell a rental unit that's affordable without further approvals. And I think was that part of your question too, Alistair?
Okay.
I would just add to that, Glenn.
Yeah, that
I
was
think that-
basic.
Sorry, Alistair. I was
Go
just going to
ahead.
add that I think the challenge is not so much in those groups or builders that are looking to do purpose-built rental. Most of them, if they are in that business, are going to proceed, and many of them, as we know, are also associated with nonprofit agencies in some cases if it's affordable rental. The challenge is around
Yes.
some of the secondary suites, and it's not even so much that they would be rental, it's just fixing the costs. And so in that case, we've looked at the options of providing for some way to control the upset limits of rent. That is a challenge. I won't say that it's not, but it, in many ways it produces the unit. It's just very hard to control a private individual for number one, who they rent that unit to and how much they charge in actuality. So that is a challenge.
Okay.
The compound that challenge, sorry to continue, but the town of Cobourg does not have a housing services or social services department. The county of Northumberland has those staff resources. So yes, the challenge is administering agreements and rent controls or rent administering without having additional or dedicated staff or housing staff. So certainly that can present some challenges if we go farther into it.
Okay. Now, my other point had to do with second suites. And it seems to me it might be useful to have some sort of a document that would help people assess whether it makes sense to do that financially. So I'm wondering if the town has anything like sort of a summary of the code requirements, so a person could assess what their situation was and figure out how much additional money would have to be expended before you can run a sort of legal second suite.
Yeah, actually, Alistair, that's one thing we've been hoping to work on since the second suite bylaw has been enacted by council about 3 years ago. The challenge with, and we can certainly provide general information as to how to go about converting your existing unit or house into a second suite. The difficulty is that it's not a one size fits all, because every situation involves many different scenarios with respect to the building code. Depends on the location, the nature of existing exits, fire separation. So we have various ranges of retrofits of existing buildings into secondary suites that ranges from as little as $20,000 to over $100,000, depending, again, on the original age of the house, just the circumstances surrounding it. So, you know, if you've ever seen the Ontario Building Code, it's probably about 12 inches thick, and if not. And it's certainly, as we say, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but we're certainly hoping to provide an information guide locally to help applicants at least understand they're going to need a designer, they're going to need certain plans and specifications particular to their own situation, because we've found out that they're all different. Basement, second floor, additions, rear, there's not a one-size-fits-all, as I said. But currently, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs does have a useful second suites guide that they've published as of, I think it was fall of 2019. So certainly we'll build upon that and make it easier, at least for applicants, to understand what what is ahead of them when it comes to planning for and constructing a second suite.
Okay, thank you very much.
That,
Rick, I get back to you.
That's all your questions. Thank you, Alistair. George, can we move to you next, please?
Okay, thank you. Comment with respect to the best practices. I was really happy to see them in there. A lot of good stuff, and actually a lot of consistency from one place to another. One of the things that jumped out at me about those were the communities you used are all quite a bit bigger than ours. Was that because you didn't find them in other communities, or other communities of our size not doing these programs? Perhaps you could shed a little light on that.
I think it's a combination of both. I think there are some that are relatively, maybe not population size, but context in terms of demographics and rental housing supply and issues are similar in nature, although they may not have the same population size. One of the challenges with the communities that have done this work is that everyone's watching everyone else. So we're kind of building upon the benefits of seeing the ones that have gone ahead, and others and we're seeing the struggles and challenges that they've had, which is, I think, one of the ones we reflected on was the city of Barrie, where they had some really interesting programs that council did some complete shifts on. I think it was Barrie at the last minute. So we're looking into why that happened. Maybe Kelly, you can speak to any of the other rationale, but certainly we wanted to look at a spectrum of municipalities, but also a spectrum of the programs and the ones where they had actually had experience implementing them and monitoring them to see what the success or some of the challenges were.
Yeah, I think I would first, specifically with reference to the affordable and rental housing incentives, because that is still such a newer set of programs that municipalities are looking into. As Deanna said, I think it's the bigger ones that are taking it on first, and they're kind of graciously being guinea pigs for now, the smaller municipalities to take a look at. And I think that's kind of where we're at for those ones. But we also did want to take ones that we knew had been relatively successful in terms of their uptake in other municipalities, and looking to areas. I think we did for the brownfields, we looked at Guelph, and we looked at Oakville, and we looked as well at the city of Welland. And for those specific incentive programs, while they weren't affordable and rental housing, they did have a suite of programs where the uptake and the amount of funding commitment was similar to that of kind of the more Cobourg context. And then I would say again, as Glenn mentioned, where the town isn't the service manager for housing, I think that that's where we're seeing these larger municipalities or regions or counties doing the work in advance of the local area, whereas we're kind of in the opposite situation where the county directed the town to do the work first. So that's if there's anything maybe Glenn or Danny you want to add, but that's kind of my take on where we landed with the best practices. And we did want to use examples from places where we know their framework has been well established and recognized. So
if I can just supplement, Kelly, thanks. My observations through the best practices were that the majority of them were housing service managers, and typically in those cases they are the larger municipality or an upper tier municipality. And as Kelly indicated, it's not often that the lower tier gets involved in these unless they are in fact implementing an affordable housing strategy or some other directive from the upper tier, in which case county has made it known that a community improvement plan is an excellent mechanism to help the provision of affordable housing. So yeah, we're taking the lead in the county, I guess, of Northumberland, being the first to get our feet wet with this affordable and rental housing CIP. But many of the examples that are out there are typically housing service managers. I think that's the best answer.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Any more questions, George?
Yeah, there was at least one mention, maybe more, with regard to including emergency and transitional housing in this. Where did we end? Where does this end up on that? Is this part of the whole plan or not?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and Kelly can add to that. I know that there was a lot of discussion about that at our public session. There were many that felt that particular area of housing was already accommodated through other sources of funding and usually by institutional associations or groups, and so it wasn't really needed. However, we had a lot of individuals that said that we really should include it to ensure that it's not excluded. And so it is part of the program, and Kelly, you can speak to that.
yeah, so what I can do is, can I share my screen quickly to just show you kind of the chart we've prepared of what we've got available? Okay. So I'm just going to make this big so everyone can see it, but and I'm just referring to the summary of the CIP program table, which is both in the executive summary and in the background report. But what we'll see here is that we did retain 2 programs for emergency and transitional housing, so they would be able to access planning and building fee waivers, and they would as well be able to access development charge grants. And what we did come to the recommendation that it would be on a sliding scale basis, again, kind of a tiered approach, where if you are an emergency and transitional housing program going way above and beyond in those sustainability and urban design and accessibility criteria, you would receive closer to the 100%. Whereas if you were kind of just coming in with the bare minimum of what you need to meet all the codes and all the criteria, then you would receive a lower grant. But they are available. But again, based on, as Dana said, the feedback we received, we didn't feel they should be the primary area of focus. And again, the primary area is really those purpose-built rental units. So I'm just going to take my screen away again.
So just if I understand this right, they're included in it, but sort of not at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose built really still is kind of number one in all of this. Okay, thank you. That's it, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Don, over to you.
I'd just like to thank you for doing the work that you did on benchmarking. I think it's been really, really helpful. I went through all of that and I was impressed with how you had teased out, especially with regard to the secondary suites. I think it was London that had a lot of information around their programs in terms of secondary suites. And I thought you teased that out really well and built the program that we would ultimately or potentially move to council based on that. So well done, guys. Thank you. Glenn, I think something that I'm going to need to understand more is this relationship. It's not really directly related to the work that's been done, but this relationship between the town and the county, and how we manage funding and all those things. That I only speak for myself, but there's certainly a learning curve for me as it relates to that, because I'm concerned, obviously, that it seems that if there's two people or two organizations that are in charge of this, then there's an opportunity for a lot of miscommunication and a lot of things to fall through the cracks. And as George noted in a previous conversation, I think all of the other communities, and Tillsonburg was mentioned, but I think it was about accessibility. It wasn't about affordable housing, if I remember correctly. So they may deal with that, but that may be separate. Anyways, my sense of it is this is going to get complicated.
If it's not already complicated, Don.
Yeah, okay. So there's a complication that might be helpful to share with the committee at some point so that we can understand. I'll only speak for myself. I can understand it a little bit better.
And it is certainly traditionally in the past, the county has really been the focal point agency, government agency dealing with affordable housing, provision of rent geared to income, housing. They have their own housing corporation and disperse federal and provincial funds on behalf of those levels of government. So that's why they are designated the housing service manager. And that, Ontario is somewhat unique. Other municipalities, other provinces, the provincial government is still the affordable housing service provider, essentially. So they are more directly involved in the provision of housing, whereas Ontario, they've delegated a lot of things, as they do, to lower tiers, in this case, the county and larger municipalities to implement. So yes, traditionally that the county has been the area, the regions, the municipalities, housing service provider. They disperse these funds. Now with more and more lower tier municipalities getting on board with providing affordable housing in smaller communities, there is that the need for a seamless integration and approach between the two levels of government, and that is certainly can be challenging in any municipality, whether it's the region of Durham and the various cities and municipalities below it. There can be some challenges. So what has transpired, at least so far with the county, is that the county is leading the way with the affordable housing strategy, the homelessness strategies and such, and the lower tier municipalities are looked at to buy into the programs, buy into the policies and guidelines, and work through it that way. I'm part, as the town of Cobourg and other municipalities, part of the County Affordable Housing Implementation Working Group. That's a long name, and it's an even weirder acronym, but it basically is trying to get that coordination between the lower tiers and the county level working together. And I think that's just in its infancy stages, because we're really just starting this whole process with this term of council. In prior terms of council, we just simply have not been involved in the provision of affordable or rental housing. So like you, it is new to us, and we are certainly working through as best we can, constant communication with the county, working back and forth. If we have questions on things, we ask the county housing manager, and they provide us with input and information. So the best I can say at this point, Don, is going to involve a lot of certainly more coordination efforts to align ourselves with their strategies. And what our council at least has in their strategic plan is made an action and an objective that our affordable housing strategy shall align with that of the counties. So the implementation is going to be key in how we work together to do that. Yeah, I think that moving forward, it's definitely an important aspect of making this successful.
Thank you. I have no further questions or comments.
Councillor Nicole.
Thank you so much. Again, echoing all the comments of my colleagues. Fantastic, comprehensive work. I have the tendency of sometimes asking questions out of scope, so absolutely no pressure to answer these, but questions always pursuit of more information. If you're able to provide indirect feedback on maybe the first question, and then I think the second question is more of a clarification if this thought bubble lies within the CIP or maybe outside of it. And if it's outside of it, then I will take that offline and continue to research that. So my first question is around financial capacity and or sustainability of this program. As many know, I would obviously advocate for this in the town's budget. Not all councillors or taxpayers feel the same way, and I feel that that is a value perspective as well. And I know you can't really say this is how much it's going to cost you each year, this is how much you should be earmarking in your town budget. 250 was what we put aside in year one, and then a little bit less this time around. So with that preamble, I guess really my direct question is to the consultants, are you in a position to possibly very high level make any commentary around what this would look like in terms of what type of a funding pool should the municipality be considering to to make this a viable and sustainable program over the next couple of years?
Well, I can start with a response. Thanks, Nicole. One of the things we did, if you recall, with the initial work was SHS Consulting, that was led by Ed Starr's group, took a look at sample programs in the context of recent development applications to see how much impact those programs would have and that they would be effective from a financial point of view. There's no point in saying we're going to waive all DCs when in fact that would only lead to a marginal benefit for the developer or builder and would have a much larger negative impact financially on the municipality. So when you look at almost like the pro formas that he ran on some of those examples, we can see that there are some that would, although the municipality is providing a benefit, at the same time, there's a loss of revenue, whether it's for planning applications or whether it's for development charges, that is not made up from anywhere else. So that's really, it's an offset. These are going to help provide the rental housing, but the offset is municipalities actually also not getting that revenue. On the other side of the equation, there are some programs where you're getting that back and even more in terms of assessment and other matters. So we tried to tie that into the programs when we put them forward. What you don't want to do with the programs that you're offsetting that are part of revenue is go to the tax base. So good example on planning fees is if we're allowing a reduction in planning fees, that revenue that would otherwise be provided has to be made up somewhere else because it's intended to be revenue neutral. So planning are still doing the work, still being employed and paid to do that work, but there's no revenue coming in. So I think with these programs, it does require sort of a financial assessment to see the level of funding that is also going to not create any other impact to some of those other, whether it's reserves or other programs. Development charges tends to be one where, because the amounts going into development charges are in reserves that are spread over so many different things, and it's such a large fund, that has the least impact in some cases, but also has the best benefit for the developers. The other thing to keep in mind, as we noted in our report, is the payments around development charges in terms of setting the fees and when they're paid for rental housing has been completely changed by Bill 108. It used to be that the developers were required to pay upon permit, and now that's been delayed and deferred to occupancy. So even that has an impact on the municipality. So I would say it's an excellent question. It's something that we need to look at in terms of the funding that is available and the uptake from the program. What are the implications for the amount of funding to the municipality? What's the offset? How long does it take to come back to a neutral position? And the other thing I would say is that how the funding is allocated, and we haven't quite set that out, other than setting amounts out based on some of the research that we did for what we think is appropriate for a funding level for the program. There may be some programs where you, if you're looking at 250,000, where you would allocate, up to 50% of the funding, whereas some of the others would be small amounts. So that's, I think, still something we need to work through and look at how that would be equitably distributed to make sure that it's monitored, and so you're renewing it with an understanding of what those actual costs have been. But again, as I say, that's why we ran the financial model, to make sure that if there was an offset, that it balanced itself within a very short period of time. Because what you don't want is to have put all this money in and not see the return for a long time. That would have significant budget implications. So I kind of answered your question by saying I don't know, but it's certainly something that we're aware of in terms of how the money gets allocated and monitoring that in terms of return. Really good example that we talked about at one of our earlier meetings, and it's a typical downtown CIP program for facade improvements. The municipality would invest, and there's been some really good work done on this, I think out of Waterloo. Municipality would invest, say, $100,000 for facade improvement program, and it would have great response and uptake. And so areas that had not seen any revitalized storefronts or facade changes in years are starting to see uptake on people taking up these $10,000 loans to redo that work. As that's happening, you're getting an infusion of interest in new tenants, new occupancies in the downtown, renovations, additions. So you're seeing from that one small program a lot of other spin-off effects, and you're seeing, increases in sales and revenue. You're having more of a, viable storefronts based on those changes. So it can spin off. And I think the same is true with some of these projects. As much as it is related to housing, I think there's a real benefit to be able to providing housing, keeping people in Cobourg, maintaining people, giving them that support with a rental housing unit to be able to, continue hopefully through residing in Cobourg and also being employed in Cobourg. It adds to that benefit, I think, with a social lens in mind as well. I don't know if Kelly, if you wanted, or Glenn wanted to add anything on the financial side.
No, that was more of thank you of a refresher, and then also more information that I was expecting for you to provide feedback on. So thank you for that. And then the second one is a lot we talk about our incentives, waiver fees or grants. have you ever seen in a CIP, or maybe this doesn't require the CIP, a municipality, Cobourg, say we have, and I know, Glenn, I'm not using all the right words, but if the town has a piece of land, or more specifically, a building that they want to repurpose or partner with or gift something, but the provision is affordable or transitional housing, or maybe it's a continuum of very housing sorts. Would that fall through the CIP? Or I'm assuming that a municipality can do that, obviously, while following the necessary acts. But I guess what I'm saying is the CIP added leverage to move something like that forward, or it really doesn't matter if a CIP is in place or not?
I think from an opportunity that the municipality may have with land or a building to encourage an interesting, whether it's a partner through Development Corp or some third-party agency, there's nothing to say that you couldn't utilize the full extent of the CIP in that situation. In fact, you know, if you're able to provide land, the only catch, I think, and Kelly can speak to this, is that some of the other programs that you can combine with whatever we're offering with a CIP often require the applicants to own the land, but there's ways to work around that with long-term leases and ownership agreements. So I think there's nothing that would preclude you to continue to do that and take advantage of all the CIP programs.
Good question though, Nicole, because that has come up a few times with respect to nonprofits where we've sold some land to Habitat for Humanity, for instance. But where it may be interesting to note, Kelly and Dana, is, you know, under the Municipal Act, we're prohibited from selling land at below market values unless we can demonstrate through a CIP or some other mechanism, whether it's a capital facilities bylaw, which we don't really have. We kind of piggyback on the county. So can this CIP actually address Councillor Beatty's, you know, request when, you know, if we have a partner that's maybe it's not a nonprofit, but a commercial developer, to partner with them, sell the land at reduced rate, allow them to then apply for CIP funds. But the act of selling them the land at reduced market value, I think we'd have to avoid the conflict in the Municipal Act through the CIP, if I'm not mistaken. Is that something we could add to the CIP?
I believe so, yep.
That might
Glenn
be something.
serves as a really great translator for me. What he
No,
said.
I think I caught your drift.
Sorry, we can look at that, definitely.
Any other comments or questions, Nicole?
No, thank you. I appreciate Dana being able to add that in, because I do believe that if we have that in the scope of the CIP, I think it's going to give us substance to help move some of these conversations forward, and I think keep this council accountable to our commitment to housing.
Thank you. I did have a few questions, but I think most of them have probably already been asked and answered. I did have a question about condominium conversions, and Glenn's dealt with that. And although it's not specifically an issue for this committee's consideration, I also had a question about how these incentive programs were going to be financed and budgeted for, and Councillor Beatty has addressed that. One I did have, so I noticed in the best practices scan, it appears that the CIP areas in the other municipalities are principally located or assigned to particular locations within the community or municipality. And you're recommending, in Cobourg's case, that they should be applied town-wide. Now, is that just simply a function of the size of Cobourg, or is there some other issue there that you've included that recommendation?
Yep. I can speak to that quickly. There are two ways you can apply the CIP project area, and some do apply it to a specific area. So in the case of Barrie, you'll see they've targeted it specifically to their urban growth center because that's where they want the growth to occur. What we found with the town, it's not a matter of magnitude of size as much as it's a matter of concern with concentrating affordable units in one particular area of the town. We feel it's a better approach to allow for the incentives to be applied town-wide so that you don't end up with clusterings of affordable or rental only in one area, and then that's kind of balancing those community objectives.
And the other thing I would add to that is that given that one of the areas is the secondary suites, I think it's really important that there are elements of the ability to provide for potential affordable rental units in the rural areas, which is often completely forgotten in most of these programs.
And if I may add a third item, back when we implemented the downtown vitalization CIP, we did amend our official plan at that time in around 2015 to include the entire town as a possible community improvement area. Previous to that, we did identify certain community improvement zones or areas throughout town. So the downtown, say there was an area towards the west end down in Pebble Beach area, some older neighborhoods around the downtown, but not really applying throughout the community. And as Dan has indicated, obviously second suites can apply throughout the community. And also, as Kelly's indicated, we don't necessarily want to concentrate all of our affordable housing in certain clusters or nodes or areas. They should be spread out throughout the municipality, which what we're seeing is that proposals are coming through for all over the municipality, whether it's University West, Monroe Street, up on Darcy and Elgin, and everywhere in between. So even through the outset of the RFP, we did want it to be town-wide, and Kelly and Dana have certainly followed through on that, and the research and data suggests that that's the right way to go too. So that's great, and that's how we approached it.
Thank you. And my final question, Glenn, is actually to you. And I know that you've probably had many, many discussions with Kelly and Dana over the last few months. Is there anything in the draft that the consulting team has prepared that you take issue with or aren't in support of?
I think we would have vetted that a while ago, probably. We wouldn't be this far. But no, I'm very pleased with how things are going. I think, obviously, we've even today talked about adding potentially items relating to Municipal Act and other opportunities for the municipality through Councillor Beattie. So, I think everything to date, I'm quite pleased with where we're going. And now we just have to overcome kind of the challenges of the public engagement and public meetings of council, which we're able to do virtually. But I think that'll be the next point of our discussion today.
So can you sort of help us understand then what the process is going to be from this point forward?
Okay, so I'm not sure, Dana, if I know you've provided a draft presentation outline for the project to date, as well some I think public engagement panels where each of those program areas are identified and discussion points are put forth for feedback from the public. So maybe I think you had maybe some ideas as to how we might roll this out moving forward. Sure. And getting that to the public.
Yeah, I don't know, Kelly, do you have, so maybe if you want to pop up on the screen, what we've done is we put together what we would see as a sort of quick presentation that would provide an overview. Yeah, thanks. Just a quick presentation that would provide an overview. And again, this would be online. our thought is that it would be narrated, so it wouldn't just be the wording with the PowerPoint. It would actually have a narration, so someone could come along and listen to the presentation technically and watch the presentation. At the end of the presentation, there would be a way to link to, imagine if you're in the room and you see a series of panels, as we've had before. People have an opportunity to review the information, and then usually through some form of post-it note or through a sticker exercise, they have an ability to comment sort of live on the panels. We're working hopefully with communications, and we've done this with one other municipality where they're able to actually click on the panel and post their comments, and then they get sort of placed with others so that, you know, and they're obviously monitored so that people can see what other people are commenting on. So that way we get a collection of comments overall and on the specific programs. And we've kind of framed the questions in a way that we're asking sort of some specific things. So this gives you a good example of one of the panels, what it would look like. We provide a definition. I think it's always important to go back to what is it that we're discussing in terms of defined terms. And then it has a list of the programs and a general description. And then we have sort of the same standard discussion questions for each. So people would have a link to these. Wow, that type is small, getting really close. So a good discussion question, for instance, on the purpose-built rental would be, which of the programs, you know, do you think will provide the most effective incentive, and maybe and why, and what further revisions, if any, would you make? What additional comments do you have? So it gives people a chance to convey their comments or questions around these, and we get that additional information collected. So that's really the intention. It is a challenge, obviously, to have these sessions done online. The other option is to have a live Q&A session, which, Glenn, we haven't talked about, but that's an option too. It's just such a challenge, depending on the platform, to have people coming in and out. Certainly if you can do it through typed questions, so you can enable the chat function and have correspondence with questions and comments that way, but I think we can balance by having an audio presentation, and then people will have an opportunity to go to each of the panels. And those would be part of the presentation. So we would do the overview and then explain to people that they can click on a link and they'll see a series of panels, and we can say in the audio, and here's an example, and literally walk through it with them. So they kind of have instructions, and then direct them to the page where they can see this information. So it's certainly not, given the content, you know, as engaging as it would be to have the in-person discussions. And I guess, again, depending on the timing when everything rolls out, there may be that opportunity, depending on, you know, how the COVID restrictions are relaxed in the next couple of months, to actually have some form of a, you know, a smaller group or an in-person session for those that might request that.
Also, Dana, with respect to being online, it can be accessible to people over a period of time, and not just, say, a one-time open house, which some people can't make. But I think it, you know, give it a certain period of being online, the presence online, and have feedback, make some sense, and have questions or email addresses to say, I have these specific questions. So we'll definitely work our way through that. We are having our first virtual Committee of Adjustment meeting next Tuesday via Zoom. So we'll let you know how that goes. We will see what the pros and cons and issues are as a result of that. But we will, as Anna has indicated, we will have to have a virtual, or hopefully maybe in-person statutory public meeting of council. So that will likely, the way we are now, we're in mid-June, so it'll likely be August, I'm thinking. Unfortunately, you never like to have them in August, but not as many people are going away these days, so we might work. So that's kind of the tentative plan moving forward, and if there's any immediate feedback or concerns, we certainly welcome them, for sure.
Thank you, Glenn. I'd like to go back to the committee members then and see if there are any final questions or comments anyone would like to offer before we conclude this portion of our agenda. Anyone? Oh, I guess we're good then. So does that conclude then the agenda with respect to the CIP, Glenn? Can we let Kelly and Dana go now?
I believe so, unless Kelly or Dana, you have anything further?
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much to the committee for your time and the support to date, and we look forward to continuing to move forward with the program. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for all the great comments.
Thank you, ladies. You're welcome to stay if you want.
It's time. It's well past my time to walk my dog, who now gets walked 4 times a day. So thanks so much,
Take care,
everyone.
Kelly.
Bye.
Take care, Dana. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, okay, there are a couple of other informational items on the agenda. One is the Tannery District. Glenn, anything to share with us today?
Again, as part of the COVID crisis emergency, not much has happened on the Tannery District Sustainable Master Plan, although we have had some contact with the consultant. They are preparing some final master plan documents for review, but again, with the COVID issue and pausing of a lot of activities through planning and development, it's not proceeded as quickly as we thought. So our timeline for coming back to this committee and council is likely extended by at least another 3 months. And just for the committee's information, you may not realize this, but our senior planner, Desta McAdams, she has moved on in mid-March when all of this COVID activity happened. Unfortunate timing, but she did leave for the city of Belleville. She's their manager of policy planning. So we have been operating the last 3 months at a reduced staff capacity, not to mention the challenges of being remote and working from home and in the workplace at various times. So all of that is the perfect storm to conclude that some of these larger planning projects are likely going to be a little bit delayed even further than what they have been in the past. So that leads into the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, which similar to the Tannery process is also impacted by both of these challenges, and due to council's priority item for the affordable rental housing CIP, we've really concentrating on getting that back and approved through council as soon as possible, hopefully prior to fall. So that's a brief update on those 2 items. They will be coming forward as soon as we can get them.
Thank you. And I have to admit, I haven't followed this one particularly closely, Glenn. Did anything ever happen with the Heritage Natural Waterfront Park proposal?
Question, you're testing my memory. That was that motion came through at your last meeting, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
February.
I don't know if you want me to chime in here, but they did want to, the last thing we had was that they wanted to come and do a presentation to our committee and speak with us. But I don't know if you've heard anything since then.
When was that, Adrian? Was it before February or after? I thought it was everything.
Cole?
Sorry to interrupt your, I think maybe if we could, I should know this, but if we could take advantage of having Mr. Larmer with us, because I do know that they came to council, staff analysis was brought back. There was direction to parks and no. You know what, why am I, Brent, you can intervene at any time.
It was received for information purposes.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's it? Okay.
So expecting that there probably will come back. So it was a report that staff did, was received for information purposes. So I think the intention was to give some more time to that group to provide a presentation to come back to council, because it's just shelved for now. There's nothing added.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad you rejoined us, Brent. What is the situation with respect to appointing members to the committee now that we've lost a couple of folks?
Yeah, so through Chair, we're trying to just get a handle on the advertisement to try to get it out. As you know, I don't want to string the same chords that Glenn just did, but I'm down with a staff member too, and we're trying to hire a deputy clerk and a records management coordinator, so I've assumed 3 secretarial duties for committees and a lot of other duties. So I'm just trying to catch up on things. So we hope to have that by the end of this week or the end of this month to try to get those applications out.
And perhaps we didn't make a note, Glenn, and you might want to mention this, that Christina did resign from the committee.
Actually, I was just going to ask you if I could speak on that, Chair Stinson. You're correct. Obviously, Christina, working with the health unit and during a pandemic emergency, has taken an enormous amount of her time away from many things. And she simply indicated she could not carry on with the Planning and Development Advisory Committee. Reluctantly, she had to resign given her work and personal situation lately. So that was very unfortunate. And I know in the short time that she has been part of the committee, she's done an amazing job, excellent contributions by her, certainly unique and very informative perspectives, I think, from that she brought forward to the committee. So yes, she too will be missed from our committee, and we'll move forward. And as Mr. Larmer's indicated, we have advertised for those positions, along with, I think, a couple of other committees, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So our complement, we hope, will be back to 100% within the next month or two, I would think, Brent. Right?
Thank you. George, did you have a comment or a question you wanted to ask?
No, Glenn just addressed it when I think it was you or someone said a couple of members. I was wondering what was going on, but it was just addressed by Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, sorry, Mr. Chair, and maybe while Brent's here and active, if you can just we weren't sure where you went before. No,
Always active.
Just kidding. Just a brief overview of Council's decision on reactivating advisory committees and in terms of statutory sections of committees and meeting only where required in terms of response to either Council's requests for referrals or statutory applications. I think I may have just summarized what you're going to say, but anyway, if you wanted to just mention that to Council, we do have a regular meeting schedule, but if there's certainly nothing, pressing or required, we will not be meeting.
Yeah, so quickly what we did, because we're in this virtual world and sometimes it's, we're trying to catch up on things and get things going, that we decided to break the committees in kind of 2 separate parts. So our non-legislative or non-statutory committees, what we said is that Council, we can allow these committees to meet virtually through Zoom application. We made that amendment to procedural bylaw. But what we do is we get them at the call of Council. So Council can activate them if they need any recommendations on any decisions or things like that, instead of rather meeting monthly for people. Sometimes, we did a scan of all advisory committee members and most of them could have done this, but most of them rather not. So we thought maybe that, this is a good alternative at the call of Council if they're looking for advice. I think Parks and Rec has a couple deadlines for some comments for some things, so they'll get activated. And then we separated them into, Accessibility Advisory Committee, Planning Advisory Development, which we're here today, and then the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Any applications that come forward, timelines, we're obviously June 22nd, the province is stopping the suspension of all the statutory deadlines and those requirements. So that'll you guys will become very active for that part. So we're doing that kind of at the call of the applications too. And then our quasi-judicial, so like our Property Standards Committee of Adjustment, those ones will again be calls of appeal or any applications that come to those committees too. So we separate it based on that. We hope to look forward to maybe the fall coming back in. We're working on plans and where we can maybe relocate spaces to come into person, but those may be a little bit longer off. But I think this is working right now. This is our first one. I think it worked out pretty good. So I think you being the guinea pigs worked out well.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Brent. Yeah.
Anything else you want to brief the committee on today, Glenn? Thank you.
There's your answer. No, well, I guess on that note, just to follow up on Brent's excellent information. So the next meeting of the committee was scheduled for July the 7th, but I foresee no immediate need or applications that would come forward needing PDAC's attention. And the next one after that is August 11th. So again, it'll be really on an as-needed basis, as we need to address legislated applications that come through the Planning Act. But just keep an eye out for circulations from Adrian and or Brent and or myself regarding future upcoming meetings, and just keep them penciled into your calendar. They may or may not actually occur.
Thank you. Councillor Beattie, anything from you before we conclude? No, thank you. Any member of the committee have anything else they'd like to comment on today? Secretary Miller, anything from you? And we're all good. Thank you all very much for your time. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Be
You
well.
do.